All right, welcome to this week's office hours. We're glad to have everybody here. Big welcome back to Aakarsh Sethi, our Senior Product Manager. Happy to have you back on, Aakarsh.
Happy to be back, Kate.
Absolutely. This week, we're going to focus on coding technology. A lot of buzz happening in the market, and rightfully so, with all of the consistent coding changes and reimbursement guidelines, all of that changing. It's been really difficult for a lot of providers to keep up. And so hence a lot of focus on coding technology right now and how it can help improve reimbursement and lower denials. So Aakarsh, let's jump right in.
Sounds good to me.
All right. So what do you see are the biggest coding challenges in 2022?
Yeah, so I've been looking at this space, a little bit deeper more recently, and I've seen a few common threads that providers and practices are talking about in terms of the challenges that they're facing. And I think the number one common theme ties into staffing shortages and lack of availability of really skilled coders. If you look at the whole RCM life cycle in terms of the different administrative functions that are in there, starting with patient access functions such as insurance verifications, checking benefits, prior authorizations, transitioning into mid-rev, where you have coding and then billing, and then into back-end, dealing with ARs and denials. I think coding stands out as the one process, the one administrative process, which requires the most clinical skill in terms of some of the other things needed. So I think you need the most skilled staff to do the coding parts of it, because not only are you checking to make sure that a certain document has procedures and diagnoses and knowing what the relevant codes are, but you also have to make sure whether you're adhering to guidelines and what is the clinical validation behind those. So that's number one. I think number two is, transitioning from the keeping up with the guidelines. A lot of providers today just approximate general commercial payer guidelines to the Medicare guidelines in terms of medical necessity. And what ends up happening is, in an effort to save work from going to different payers, checking individual guidelines, they're really missing out on some of the nuances and, for lack of a better word, idiosyncrasies of certain commercial payers. So let's say 5 out of your 7 major payers are reimbursing a certain code without a modifier, but let's say Aetna requires a different modifier for the same sort of conditions and codes. Well, providers are getting denied in those cases. So really keeping up with the different and varied guidelines of individual commercial payers. The next one is, of course, updated codes and then updated guidelines for those codes and for existing codes as well. Especially in the last couple of years, we've seen a bunch of new codes being added, whether that's diagnosis codes or procedure codes, with those guidelines for those codes, but also just guidelines for existing codes for several payers gets updated more than on an annual basis. Sometimes it's on a quarterly basis, if not more frequently. So keeping up with all of that to make sure that reimbursement is in check, I think, is another challenge. And last but definitely not the least is having to deal with bad documentation and missing data in your documentation. And sometimes this can be very frustrating because from a rendering or a furnishing provider's point of view, this is out of their control. This is what is coming to them from the referring or the ordering provider. So chasing down ordering providers, dealing with documentation lapses is certainly an area of pain point as well.
Yeah, you mentioned the staffing challenges. I mean, I remember ICD-10 went live 2015, October 2015, and we were dealing with staffing challenges then, right? I mean, we went from, 17,000 to however many, like 3 times that number of codes, and saw a lot of coders leave the market because they didn't want to go in and learn all these new codes. So the staffing challenges have gone back that far, and healthcare providers just can't catch a break when it comes to staffing challenges. I mean, that we went through, obviously COVID disrupted the market again. So yeah, for sure, that's definitely a challenge. And I think many coders would agree with you on the documentation piece, because they live and breathe the fact that physicians aren't documenting to support the code. So let's kind of dive into the technology piece. What is computer assisted coding technology? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, quite literally, coding, computer assisted coding is, as it says, right? It's coding that is assisted by a machine, a software, a computer. And the aim really here is to alleviate some of the challenges that practices at a macro level, but also coders on a micro level face. So we went over some of the challenges that this face. I think on an individual basis, from an individual coder's point of view, what a coder has to do is review pages and pages of patients' encounter notes and clinical history to really identify a few set of descriptions and procedures and make sure, the CCI edits are in place, other coding guidelines and medical necessity guidelines are met, and so on. And they have to do this really one after another for a number of charts in one day. What ends up happening is there's lapses, of course, in human productivity and accuracy. And that's where really the concept of a solution, which in this case is, CAC, CAC, computer assisted coding, steps in, which is it tries to alleviate those pain points. So essentially what it does is it's a solution that is able to, to a varied extent, automate this manual process, which is reviewing documents, coming up with codes based on identifying procedures, diagnoses, and then, of course, keeping in check with the medical necessity and billing rules as well.
What forms of technology do CACs use?
Yeah, so I would segment CACs into two buckets, and I'll call one of them computer assisted coding, and I'll call the other one auto coding. And I think this is where I was, referring to varied levels of automation in a CAC solution. So one set of solutions is really trying to help the coder be more productive and accurate, which we'll call computer assisted coding. And on the other end, the auto coding is essentially trying to just completely automate that task, right? Now, the core technologies behind both of these remain the same to a large extent. And they too can be segmented into two different buckets. One is, we'll call it a rule-based coding. And the second one, we'll call it an NLP-based coding, which is natural language processing. So rule-based coding is essentially when, let's say at the point of consult, a physician staff is already picking and choosing certain diagnoses and procedures, which makes it more conducive to extract codes out of it. They're making sure that encounter notes, while being documented, they're selecting certain descriptions from a software of the patient's conditions and procedures, and then that helps you to more easily extract codes from the document. Here, we're not essentially reading or understanding the entire history, the entire clinical history of a patient, but we're really codifying some of these descriptions at the point of encounter, just post it so that, the downstream process becomes easier. The other piece of technology, which is, more exciting to me, is natural language processing, and solutions that are predicated on this technology can really go beyond what I just mentioned. So they can really go ahead, read through pages and pages of documentation, But not just that, right? Reading is not enough. Understanding and extract meaning from it, and then come up with codes in an intelligent fashion. So I think it's worth spending a little bit of time on what NLP is. Natural language processing is essentially, we call it a part of AI in general, which really trains computers to be able to read and extract meaning from text or speech in that matter. And it works similarly to how other forms of AI work, which is it can be supervised or unsupervised, where it's basically learning on historical outcomes. So technologies like this look at, if not millions, if not multiple millions, at least several hundreds of thousands of coded charts, and really pick up meaning on how certain sentences are tied to each other and how meaning should be extracted from text in that manner. Within NLP itself, though, within NLP solutions, there's levels here as well. The most primitive and simple form of NLP is just keyword search, and people will be familiar with that, where, based on certain keywords, a machine or an algorithm is picking up meaning from text. So let's say that we have coded in that for a CT of lower spine, certain set of diagnoses are supposed to be found, right? So what this form of very rudimentary NLP will do is it will look just for those basic terms, and then it'll combine it with the rule-based approach, where it'll see whether those diagnoses are a match for a particular procedure or not. But I think the real value of NLP and AI is going beyond just looking for keywords, right? Looking for the fact that CT of lower spine, if you find the word CT lower spine, and if you find lower back pain, well, that's good enough. You can find codes from that. I think that's not good enough. I think, especially in the healthcare domain, it is so important to understand context and semantics of the healthcare language. And I think that's where most of the work within this space, within clinical NLP, is going on right now, where you're going beyond keywords and you're looking at patterns, you're looking at linguistic rules, semantic rules, so that you can really tie in, words from different sentences, put them together, and really extract meaning in a way that a human would extract meaning from it. So let's say we go through the same example of CT of lower spine and lower back pain. What if your documentation said that the patient should have CT of lower spine, but does not have lower back pain? We call this term negation. In a simple keyword search, this would just say, hey, there's lower back pain and there's CT of lower spine. Good, I think that works. But we want to go beyond that, right? We want to be able to know that, hey, this actually said that there was no signs of lower back pain, for example. Very simple example, but you can keep going further here. And I think attendees on this call will know to a greater degree the complexities that arise in some of these documentations. So that was, I think, a semi-brief summary of NLP and rule-based computer-assisted coding.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I think NLP is still a new term for a lot of folks, so appreciate you providing more context around that. How can computer-assisted coding help and support healthcare providers as well as their coders?
Right. So I think, we spoke a lot about what it can do. And of course, there's a lot more that it can do that, we could cover in 5 minutes or so. But I think it's time to talk, as you said, about the benefits from that, right? How does this actually help providers? So just think about a coder reviewing, again, depending on your setting, whether it's an outpatient setting or inpatient setting, whether it's just regular ICD codes, whether you're going into HCC, whether you're a provider, whether you're a payer, the length of documentation that a coder has to look at for just one patient can significantly vary. It can be 5 pages, it can be 100 pages, right? So the scope for human error, first of all, is significant. Second of all, look at the time that is being consumed to review a 100-page document. That same 100-page document through a similar solution that we talked about could be reviewed in seconds, if not in real time, right? So there's a lot of time savings that come with this. And again, depending on the level of automation you're looking for, right? Whether it's the assisted approach or the completely automated approach, that time can vary. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about an assisted approach where you still want, a human, a coder to review the chart. In that case, I'll give you an example of a fully coded NLP CAC output where a 100-page document is highlighted with all the diagnoses and all the procedures, and then equivalent codes for each one of those entities. Mm-hmm. Now, instead of having to read every word and every sentence, your coder can just scroll through all the codes and all the highlights. And the time savings here can be anywhere between 50% or more. And again, depending on the complexity of your specialty and of your codes and setting, I think the approach will vary of how automated you want this. So a great rise in productivity, I think, is one of the key benefits. And then the second one is an increase in accuracy. We'll go back to the example of reviewing a 100 or a 50-page document, where it is, again, certainly possible for a human being to ignore certain words or miss a sentence, especially if that person has already reviewed 5 other patients, 250 pages of documents. The coder is on his 6th patient, and it's natural that sometimes you miss certain key elements, and that is where technology like this can also help. AI doesn't get tired, so I think increase in productivity, increase in accuracy, which again, what does that mean for you? That means cost savings. That also means reduction in denials downstream, particularly coding related denials.
So what should I look for? I've decided, yes, I need to engage a CAC platform or technology. What do I look for in a vendor or partner?
So you will pick whether you want a computer assisted coding, where something that can augment your existing staff and increase their productivity, or if you're looking for something a solution that can actually automate this and is is independent in the way it performs this task. And then next one is what is the type of technology? Hopefully you've learned a little bit about the difference in rule-based and NLP coding right now. So you can ask solutions and vendors how far do they go with their technology in terms of being able to read documentations and come up with codes. And then the last bit would be the integration bit, right? Which is, do you want that seamless experience where as soon as a document comes up or a charge shows up within your billing system, should it show up with the CAC output? So for example, codes already up there, procedures and diagnoses already highlighted on those documents, and so on.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Aakarsh. So much really, really good information. Thank you all so much for joining. Huge thank you to you, Aakarsh, for sharing lots of really, really good information with us. And have a great evening, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you back here next week.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.